What happens when a county sheriff's son believes his father's badge makes him untouchable and brutally assaults an 82-year-old Vietnam War veteran in broad daylight? This arrogant young man strutted into Judge Judith Sheindlin's Los Angeles courtroom with a smirk on his face and a team of expensive lawyers at his side, fully expecting his family connections to make everything disappear. But when Judge Sheindlin forced his father to stand before the court and choose between protecting his son and honoring everything he swore to uphold, what happened next became the most explosive moment in California judicial history. The defendant leaned back in his chair, checking his Rolex, barely paying attention as the charges were read. When Judge Sheindlin looked up from her paperwork and caught him texting on his phone, she said nothing. She simply waited. The silence stretched for 10 seconds, 20, 30. The entire courtroom held its breath. Finally, the defendant looked up, and the expression on Judge Sheindlin's face made him drop his phone like it was on fire. "Are we boring you, Mr. Harrison?" Judge Sheindlin asked, her voice carrying that famous razor-sharp edge that had made her a legend. "Because I can assure you, by the time we're done here today, you're going to wish boredom was your biggest problem." And what nobody in that packed courtroom knew was that Los Angeles County Sheriff William Harrison was sitting in the back row, wearing civilian clothes, watching his only son destroy a 38-year legacy of service. The decision he was about to make would shatter his family, restore a veteran's faith in the justice system, and prove that some fathers love their principles more than they love protecting their children from the consequences of their own cruelty. It was a scorching August morning in downtown Los Angeles. Judge Judith Sheindlin was preparing for what her clerk had described as a routine assault case. But after 4 decades on the bench, she knew that cases involving powerful families were never routine. They were powder kegs waiting for a spark. The victim was an 82-year-old Vietnam War veteran named Harold Chen. The defendant was 4-year-old Bradley Harrison, only son of Los Angeles County Sheriff William Harrison, one of the most powerful law enforcement officials on the West Coast. 6 days ago, Harold Chen was feeding pigeons in Echo Park, the same bench he'd sat on every morning for the past 23 years since his wife passed away. Bradley Harrison, driving his matte black Porsche Cayenne at nearly twice the speed limit, had to slam on his brakes when Mr. Chen's small dog wandered into his path. According to 7 separate witnesses, Bradley laid on his horn for a full 30 seconds, screaming obscenities. When the elderly Mr. Chen slowly rose from his bench to collect his dog, Bradley threw his car into park, jumped out, and stormed toward the 82-year-old man. What happened next was captured on 4 different cell phone cameras. Bradley grabbed Harold Chen by his shirt collar and threw him to the ground. When Mr. Chen tried to get up, Bradley kicked him twice in the ribs. When a young mother with a stroller tried to intervene, Bradley turned on her and screamed, "You want some too? Do you have any idea who my father is? He runs every cop in this county. Touch your phone and I'll have you arrested for interfering with official business." He wasn't conducting any official business. He wasn't even a law enforcement officer. He was a 34-year-old man who had never worked a real job in his life, living off his father's reputation and his family's money. Bradley then calmly walked back to his Porsche, took a photo of Mr. Chen lying on the ground, and drove away laughing. Multiple witnesses confirmed he was laughing as he left an 82-year-old war hero bleeding in the grass. Harold Chen suffered a shattered hip, requiring surgery and months of physical therapy, 4 broken ribs, with 1 puncturing his lung, a severe concussion, and facial lacerations needing 27 stitches. His beloved dog, frightened by the assault, ran into traffic and was struck by a passing car. The dog's name was Mary. the last birthday gift Harold's wife had given him before she died of cancer 3 years earlier. Mr. Chen spent 11 days in Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. His medical bills exceeded $340,000. And when he was finally released, he learned that Bradley Harrison had been posting on social media about the incident, calling Mr. Chen a senile old fool who shouldn't be allowed in public, and bragging that the charges would disappear like they always do. The videos went viral within hours. The hashtag Justice for Harold trended nationally for 3 days. Veterans groups from across the country descended on Los Angeles, demanding accountability. "My father will fix this," Bradley had told reporters outside the courthouse just yesterday. "He always does." Those words were about to come back to haunt him. The courtroom was standing room only. Local and national media filled every corner. Veterans wearing their service caps and medals occupied an entire section of the gallery. The energy in the room was electric, volatile, like a storm about to break. But there was one person whose presence would change everything, and no one knew he was there. Sheriff William Harrison had arrived before anyone else and taken a seat in the very last row, partially hidden behind a pillar. He was wearing jeans and a plain gray t-shirt. His badge was locked in his desk drawer at home. He looked like any other citizen who had come to watch justice be served. He hadn't told his son he was coming. He hadn't told his wife. He had barely slept in 6 days, ever since he'd watched those videos and felt his heart break into pieces. At exactly 9 o'clock, the bailiff called the court to order. The people of the state of California versus Bradley William Harrison. The clerk announced, charges include assault and battery on an elderly person, assault causing great bodily injury, elder abuse, animal cruelty, and witness intimidation. Bradley Harrison made his entrance like he was walking onto a yacht party. He was wearing a custom Italian suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His attorney, Victoria Sterling, was one of the most expensive defense lawyers in California. Behind them walked 2 more lawyers and a public relations consultant. A team of 4 people to defend a man who had beaten an 82-year-old veteran unconscious. As Bradley passed the row where Harold Chen was sitting in a wheelchair, his face still bearing the scars of the attack, Bradley didn't even glance in his direction. He was too busy adjusting his cufflinks. Judge Sheindlin noticed. She noticed everything. "Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice cutting through the courtroom, murmur like a scalpel. "Before we begin, I want to make something crystal clear. In this courtroom, I don't care who your father is. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care how many lawyers you brought. The only thing I care about is the truth. And I have a very particular talent for knowing when someone is lying to me. Do we understand each other?" Bradley's lead attorney stood up immediately. "Your Honor, we object to the implication that my client would be anything less than truthful. Mr. Harrison comes from a family of distinguished public servants and—" "Sit down," Judge Sheindlin interrupted, not even looking at her. "I wasn't talking to you. Mr. Harrison, do you have a voice? Or does Miss Sterling speak for you in all matters?" Bradley smirked. It was an automatic response. He'd been smirking his way out of trouble his entire life. "I can speak for myself." "Your Honor. And yes, we understand each other perfectly." "Good. Then let's start with a simple question. How do you plead?" Victoria Sterling stood again. "Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty. We intend to demonstrate that this incident has been wildly exaggerated by social media and that Mr. Chen's injuries, while unfortunate, were largely the result of his own frailty and not any action by—" "I'm sorry," Judge Sheindlin interrupted. her eyes blazing. Did you just say his own frailty? Are you actually standing in my courtroom, in front of that man in the wheelchair, suggesting that your client kicking an 82-year-old war veteran in the ribs was a minor altercation? I'm simply saying that the charges are excessive. What you're saying is offensive. What you're saying is disgraceful. Judge Sheindlin removed her glasses. Mr. Harrison, since your attorney seems determined to dig you a deeper hole, let me ask you directly. Did you or did you not assault Harold Chen in Echo Park 6 days ago? Bradley leaned forward, his confidence unshaken. Your Honor, I was having a terrible day. When that old man's mutt ran in front of my car, I lost my temper. I may have pushed him, but I certainly didn't assault anyone. He fell because he's old and can't keep his balance. The gallery erupted in angry murmurs. Judge Sheindlin banged her gavel twice. You may have pushed him. He fell because he's old. Is that your testimony? Mr. Harrison, that's what happened. Your Honor, the media has blown this out of proportion because of who my father is. Judge Sheindlin nodded slowly. I see. Well, let's test that theory. Bailiff, please dim the lights. On the large screen behind the judge's bench, the first video began to play. Bradley's Porsche speeding through the park, his horn blaring. The elderly Mr. Chen slowly rising. Bradley jumping out, his face twisted with rage. And then the assault. Bradley didn't push Harold Chen. He grabbed him by the shirt and threw him to the ground with violent force. When Mr. Chen tried to protect himself, Bradley kicked him in the ribs. Hard. Brutal kicks delivered with clear intent to cause maximum damage. The video showed Bradley threatening the young mother, his finger pointing in her face. And then, as Mr. Chen lay motionless on the ground, blood pooling beneath his head, Bradley Harrison took out his phone and snapped a photo. He was smiling. The lights came back up. The courtroom was absolutely silent. You may have pushed him. Is that still your testimony? Mr. Harrison, Bradley's face had gone pale. I didn't realize it looked that bad. But you have to understand, I just found out my girlfriend was cheating on me. And oh, stop. Judge Sheindlin held up her hand. Your girlfriend cheated on you. So you beat an 82-year-old man unconscious? That's your defense? I'm just saying I wasn't thinking clearly. No. Mr. Harrison, you were thinking very clearly. You were thinking that you could do whatever you wanted because your father is the sheriff. You were thinking that consequences are for other people, not for you. She picked up a file from her desk. Let me tell you who Harold Chen is, since you couldn't be bothered to find out before you nearly killed him. Harold Chen was born in 1,943 inches, San Francisco, to Chinese immigrant parents who worked 18-hour days just to put food on the table. When the Vietnam War escalated, Harold enlisted in the Army at age 22. He served 2 tours as a combat medic, saving 43 lives on the battlefield, often running into enemy fire to drag wounded soldiers to safety. He was awarded the Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts. She turned the page. After the war, Harold faced discrimination and hatred, but instead of becoming bitter, he dedicated his life to service. He became a paramedic with the Los Angeles Fire Department for 42 years, responding to over 15,000 emergency calls and delivering 23 babies in the field. Harold married his high school sweetheart, Mary, in 1968. They were married for 53 years until she passed away from cancer in 2021. The dog you got killed, Mr. Harrison, was named Mary. It was the last birthday gift Harold's wife gave him before she died. Judge Sheindlin set down the file. That is the man you called some old man. That is the man whose dog you called a mutt. That is the man you left bleeding in the grass while you laughed and drove away. Bradley's face had gone completely white. But what he said next proved that his arrogance ran deeper than anyone imagined. I didn't know any of that. How was I supposed to know he was some kind of war hero? Judge Sheindlin stared at him. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried to every corner of the silent courtroom. Mr. Harrison. It shouldn't matter if he was a war hero or a homeless man. Every human being deserves basic dignity and safety. The fact that you think his service record is the only thing that might make your assault unacceptable tells me everything I need to know about your character. She paused, then looked toward the back of the courtroom. Actually, there's someone here who might want to address that point. Sheriff Harrison, would you please come forward? The entire courtroom turned as one. In the back row, rising slowly to his feet, was William Harrison, sheriff of Los Angeles County. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 6 days. His eyes were red-rimmed. His shoulders, usually squared with military precision, were slumped with the weight of what he was about to do. Bradley's face cycled through shock, hope, and confusion. Dad, what are you doing here? Are you here to be quiet? Bradley. The sheriff's voice was hoarse. For once in your life, just be quiet. Sheriff Harrison walked down the center aisle, every eye following him. When he reached the front of the courtroom, he stood at attention before Judge Sheindlin. Your Honor, I apologize for attending without announcing myself. I needed to see this with my own eyes. I needed to hear what my son would say when he didn't know I was watching. And what did you hear? Sheriff, I heard everything I was afraid I would hear. I heard my son show no remorse. I heard him lie to this court. I heard him disrespect a veteran who served this country with more courage in one day than my son has shown in his entire life. I heard him use my name, my position, my life's work as a shield for his inexcusable behavior. He turned to face Bradley. And what happened next would be replayed on news programs around the world. Bradley, I want you to listen carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. For 34 years, I have protected you. When you were expelled from prep school for cheating, I made calls. When you crashed your car drunk at 19, I kept it off your record. When you got into that fight in Newport Beach, I made it go away. When your business partner accused you of fraud, I convinced him not to press charges. Bradley's face reddened with humiliation. Dad, please. I said, be quiet. The sheriff's voice was thunderous. I told myself I was protecting you, but I wasn't protecting you. Bradley. I was enabling you. I was teaching you that you could do anything. Hurt anyone. And Daddy would make it all better. Tears were streaming down the sheriff's face now. 6 days ago, I watched those videos. I watched you throw an 82-year-old man to the ground. I watched you kick him. I watched you threaten a mother with a baby. I watched you take a photo like he was a trophy. And I watched you laugh. He stepped closer to his son. And do you know what I felt? I felt like I was watching a stranger. I kept asking myself, how did I raise this person? How did the boy I taught to ride a bike, the boy I coached in Little League, become a man who could do what you did? Bradley's composure finally shattered. Dad, I'm sorry. I was angry, and I wasn't thinking. No. You weren't thinking. You haven't been thinking for 34 years because you've never had to. There have never been any consequences for you. And that is my fault. That is my greatest failure as a father. Sheriff Harrison turned back to Judge Sheindlin. Your Honor, I came here today to do something I should have done a long time ago. I came here to stop protecting my son from the consequences of his actions. Sheriff Harrison. Judge Sheindlin said, her voice softening slightly. I want to be clear about what you're saying. You understand that whatever statement you make here is on the record. This could affect your career, your family, your relationship with your son. I understand, Your Honor, and I don't care about my career anymore. I care about doing what's right. He straightened his shoulders. I have served this county for 38 years. I have arrested murderers, rapists, corrupt politicians. I have put my life on the line to protect innocent people. And the entire time, I was going home to a son who believed he could harm anyone he wanted because of the badge I carried. He turned to face Mr. Chen, who had been watching with an unreadable expression. Mr. Chen, I want to look you in the eye and apologize for what my son did. No words can undo it. No apology can heal your injuries or bring back your dog. But I want you to know that I am deeply sorry. Not as a law enforcement officer, but as a father who failed to raise a decent human being. Harold Chen looked at the sheriff for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. Sheriff Harrison, I spent 2 years in Vietnam watching young men make terrible choices. Some were good men who did bad things. Some were bad men who did worse things. The difference wasn't in what they did, but in what they did afterward. He paused. Your son did a terrible thing to me. But what you're doing right now? Choosing justice over your own blood. Tells me something. Maybe your son has it in him to change. The question is whether he will. Sheriff Harrison bowed his head. Thank you, Mr. Chen. You're a better man than I deserve. Judge Sheindlin cleared her throat. Sheriff Harrison, you said you came here to stop protecting your son? What exactly does that mean? It means that whatever sentence you deem appropriate, you have my complete support. I will not make phone calls on his behalf. I will not use my influence to reduce his punishment. He took a shaky breath. Furthermore, I am prepared to testify as a witness for the prosecution if necessary. I will hold nothing back. Victoria Sterling shot to her feet. Objection. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Sit down. Ms. Sterling, Sheriff Harrison is not being compelled to do anything. He's volunteering. The sheriff turned to Bradley, who was sitting motionless, tears running down his face. Bradley, I love you. You're my son. And nothing will ever change that. But love doesn't mean protecting you from consequences. Real love means holding you accountable so you have a chance to become a decent person. He walked toward his son and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small object and set it on the table. It was a junior deputy badge that Bradley had worn as a child. I gave you this when you were 6 years old. You told me you wanted to be just like me. You wanted to protect people. You wanted to help people. He tapped the badge. This is who you were supposed to be. And somewhere along the way, I failed you, and you became something else entirely. Bradley picked up the badge with trembling hands. Dad, I can still be that person. Just help me one more time. No. No more help. Not the kind you're asking for. The only help I can give you now is the help you don't want. The help that comes with consequences. He stepped back. Your Honor. I'm ready to hear whatever sentence you think is appropriate. Judge Sheindlin looked at this broken father with something approaching compassion. Sheriff Harrison, thank you for your testimony. Please take a seat in the gallery. The sheriff sat down heavily, looking like a man who had just fought the hardest battle of his life. Judge Sheindlin turned to Bradley. Mr. Harrison, when you walked into this courtroom, You were arrogant, dismissive, and utterly convinced you would walk out without consequences. You lied to me. You showed no remorse. You used your father's position as a shield. She paused. But something changed when your father started talking. I saw shame on your face. And when he put that badge on the table, I saw real pain. Bradley nodded miserably. Let me be clear. That pain doesn't excuse what you did. Nothing excuses what you did. You brutalized a defenseless elderly man for no reason other than your own temper and entitlement. You deserve to be punished. And you will be punished. She picked up her pen. But I also believe in redemption. Mr. Harrison, I believe that people can change if they truly want to. Bradley William Harrison, I find you guilty on all counts. Assault and battery on an elderly person. Assault causing great bodily injury. Elder abuse. Animal cruelty. And witness intimidation. Here is your sentence. You will serve 2 years in the Los Angeles County Jail. Upon release, you will complete 500 hours of community service at the Los Angeles Veterans Administration Hospital, working directly with elderly veterans. You will attend anger management counseling for 2 years. You will pay full restitution to Mr. Day Chen for all medical expenses, plus compensation for pain, suffering, and the loss of his pet. You will also create a video statement accepting full responsibility for your actions, to be posted publicly. You will not minimize what you did. You will tell the truth about who you were and who you are trying to become. Finally, after you complete your sentence, you will speak to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Academy recruits about privilege, accountability, and the dangers of believing you are above the law. She set down her pen. Do you have anything to say? Bradley stood slowly. He looked at his lawyers, who wanted him to stay quiet. Then at his father, who gave him the smallest nod. Your Honor, I don't have any excuses. Everything you said about me is true. I've spent my whole life believing rules didn't apply to me, that my father's badge made me untouchable. He turned to face Harold Chen. Mr. Chen, I am so sorry. I'm sorry for hurting you. I'm sorry for killing your dog. I was wrong. Completely wrong. And I know sorry doesn't fix anything. But it's all I have right now. He turned to his father. Dad, I'm sorry for disappointing you. I'm sorry for using your name to hurt people. You were right about everything. I need to face this. I need to change. And I'm going to try. Judge Sheindlin nodded once. Mr. Harrison, that is the first honest thing you've said since you walked into my courtroom. Remember how that felt. 2 years from now. When you walk out of that jail, you're going to have a choice. You can go back to being the person you were, or you can become someone better. That choice is yours. She turned to Mr. Chen. Mr. Chen, do you have anything you'd like to say? The elderly veteran rolled his wheelchair forward slightly. Your Honor, I've lived a long life. I've watched men do terrible things and then become wonderful fathers and citizens. I've watched men who seemed hopeless turn their lives around. He looked directly at Bradley. Young man, you took a lot from me. My health, my dog, my sense of safety. But you can't take my dignity. And you can't take my capacity for forgiveness. I'm not ready to forgive you today. Maybe not for a long time. But I'm willing to leave that door open if you prove you've earned it. Bradley nodded, tears streaming down his face. Thank you, Mr. Chen. I'll try. I promise. Judge Sheindlin banged her gavel. Sentencing is complete. Bailiffs, please take Mr. Harrison into custody. As the bailiffs approached, Sheriff Harrison stood up from the gallery. Father and son looked at each other across the courtroom. "Dad," Bradley said, his voice breaking. "Will you visit me?" The sheriff walked forward and pulled Bradley into a tight embrace. "I'll visit," he whispered, "not to comfort you, but to support you while you do the hard work of becoming someone I can be proud of." He pulled back and looked into his son's eyes. "I love you, Bradley, but I love you enough to let you face this. Don't waste this chance." The bailiffs led him away. Sheriff Harrison remained standing in the aisle, watching until his son was completely out of sight. Judge Sheindlin addressed the courtroom one final time. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you witnessed here today is not just about one case. It's about the choices we make when someone we love does something unforgivable." Sheriff Harrison could have used his influence to make this disappear. Instead, he chose justice. He chose to honor Mr. SHOCKS. Chen. He chose to finally hold his son accountable. She looked around the packed gallery. That is not an easy choice. It may be the hardest choice a parent ever has to make. But sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to protect them from the consequences they need to face. The courtroom erupted in applause. Veterans stood and saluted Sheriff Harrison. Harold Chen reached out from his wheelchair and shook the sheriff's hand. "Your son is lucky to have a father like you." "Mr." Chen said. Sheriff Harrison shook his head. "No, Mr. Chen. He's lucky to have a victim like you, someone who believes in second chances." 20 months later, Bradley William Harrison walked out of the Los Angeles County Jail. He had been granted early release for exemplary behavior and completing every rehabilitation program available to him. He had lost 40 pounds. He had grown a beard more gray than brown. But the biggest change was in his eyes. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something quieter, more thoughtful. His father was waiting outside the gates. They embraced. And this time, it wasn't the embrace of a father protecting his child from consequences. It was the embrace of two men who had been through something terrible and come out the other side. "I have something to tell you," Bradley said. "I want to start a foundation. Something that helps elderly veterans who've been victims of crimes. Something that honors what Mr. Chen taught me about service and sacrifice." Sheriff Harrison stared at his son for a long moment. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." For the first time in almost 2 years, the sheriff smiled. "Then let's get to work." Harold Chen passed away peacefully in his sleep 8 months after Bradley's release. At the age of 84, in the final months of his life, something remarkable happened. Bradley had begun visiting him regularly. At first, as part of his court-ordered community service, but eventually because they had become friends. Bradley was at Harold's bedside when he died. The old veteran's last words to him were, "You turned out okay, kid. Mary would have liked you." At Harold's funeral, Bradley delivered the eulogy. "Harold Chen was the best man I ever knew," he said, "and I met him on the worst day of my life, when I hurt him in ways I can never fully make right. But Harold taught me that your past doesn't have to define your future. He taught me that every person deserves dignity. He taught me that real strength isn't about power or position. Real strength is about grace." Sheriff William Harrison, sitting in the front row, watched his son with tears streaming down his face. This was who Bradley was supposed to be. This was the man he had always hoped his son would become. The Harold Chen Foundation for Veteran Dignity was launched 1 month later. Within 2 years, it had chapters in 38 states and had assisted over 10,000 veterans. Judge Judith Sheindlin, in a rare interview years later, reflected on that day in her courtroom. I've handed down thousands of sentences, she said. But that case stands out because it wasn't just about punishment. It was about transformation. Sheriff Harrison modeled what it looks like to put principles above personal loyalty. And Bradley used his consequences as a catalyst to become a completely different person. She paused. People ask me if I believe in redemption. I tell them what I saw with Bradley Harrison. Real change is possible. But only if you face the full consequences of your actions. You can't skip to the redemption part. You have to go through the pain, the shame, the hard work. Sheriff Harrison understood that. And ultimately, so did his son. Justice served. Lessons learned. And in the end, redemption earned.